Hello and welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport where I guess we're all questioning our agenda now, aren't we? We're all questioning what it is to be us and what we really are. And there's no need because things were fine a month ago and they'll be fine a month hence. And I don't know why people are getting their knickers in a twist. So let's talk about it. And let's kind of start with what we do know. So Iman Khalif is an amateur boxer. I think she must be about 40 odd bouts into her career, right? 45, 46. Reasonable record, about 37 wins, about 9 losses. Not many stoppages, right? I'm sure if you looked at Clarissa Shields' record, she'd probably have a higher proportion of stoppages. So you look at that and you go, unremarkable. And then you remember that she boxed Amy Broadhurst, and it might have been last year in the 63 kilo final, if I remember. Uneventful. Amy kind of just got the win. That's how I describe it. Amy got the win. And anyone that's seen that fight, nothing unusual. If I remember correctly, Andy Clark was talking about these shots that Khalif was throwing are not heavy. Amy's face wasn't bloodied up, her nose wasn't broken. The punches weren't causing her any distress. Amy was able to bully her way to a victory. It was quite an efficient performance. It reminded me a lot of Lauren Price. In fact, those two fighting would be a good fight. And we might see that sooner than we think. And I'm going to focus on Khalif because we haven't seen the woman from Taiwan yet. So it's not fair to jump on that without more data. So what we also know is Khalif was also disqualified from the World Championships for the IBA says she failed a gender identification test. We don't know what that is. We don't know the methodology that was behind that. We don't know the results. And here's the thing I'll say. If you're going to say someone failed a gender test, you have to define what that gender is. So what are the parameters of being a woman? It can't just be, oh, you got an XX chromosome, because there's a condition called Turner syndrome, where some women are born without the second X, or the second X is deformed in some way. And would you fail a test that way? Potentially. And what does that mean? That means we would then be saying, well, you failed the gender eligibility test, so you shouldn't be boxing as a woman. It's like, well, where else can I box? So this time last year, right? No one even knows who Khalif is. It's not a factor. Or Bobby down the pub who's just finished kicking off in Hartlepool, doesn't know, doesn't care. Khalif does what she has to do, qualifies for the Olympics. I think she did it through the African route. And so the story comes out during the Olympics, and you have to assume that it was the IBA, who were the governing body before the IOC kicked them out. So it had to have been the IBA that leaked this, because these are confidential records that they keep. You can't just share people's medical history. We wouldn't have known she failed the test if the IBA kept their mouth shut, right? So they must be behind these leaks and these stories. And they were very, very clear in the language they used. They never called Khalif a man. Never. Like I said, what are the parameters? It can't be as simple as 2 letters. Like, there have to be real parameters that say, this is someone who's a man, this is someone who's a woman, right? And then, as there are exceptions, we can deal with those. Right? That's how life works. So now we've got this story concerning these 2 boxers. And these are 2 boxers who, if you remember, boxed in 2021, didn't win gold, not dominant fighters. They have records that you'd hope a top-level boxer would have, but not spectacular. Okay? And so these guys have fought 6 years, 8 years, who knows, right? And this is the first time the public have sort of zeroed in and just gone, oh my God, what the hell's happening here, right? And boxing doesn't help itself. We've been a bit of a basket case for a long time, right? And so this is a good chance for people to kick off, because everyone's got an agenda. The guys who broke away from the IBA have an agenda. The guys with the IBA have an agenda. Everyone's got an agenda right now because everything's got super political. So here's where we end up. Yeah, we've had a week of hand-wringing and there's been a moral panic about we can't let a man, this is what people say, we can't let a man fight a woman in a boxing ring at the Olympics. Now, let's just stop for a second. With the billions at stake, do you think the IOC would be that stupid? You don't think the IOC and the task force they appointed to manage the Olympic boxing program, you don't think they would have said, IBA, either tell us what happened or we're just going to assume that the fact that they've boxed at the Olympics before means they're okay. And that you're just making mischief now because we haven't seen any scientific evidence to substantiate your claims. And so all of this is happening. People are kicking off and there are all these think pieces, and maybe I'm guilty of it too. But suddenly, boxing coaches who have 3 GCSEs are experts in gender identification, something that even the experts can't agree on. Right? And people talk about boycotts and this and that. And look, there are situations as a coach where I'd pull my fighter out. If I felt they were in danger, I'd pull them out, regardless of whether there was controversy around the opponent. Safety over everything. And so, and I was guilty of this. The clip of Khalifi boxing the Mexican lady comes out. And she did her thing. She boxed well. Nothing spectacular, but you could see that she was leagues above the person she was fighting. So all of this happens in the background, and people are like, the fight can't happen, the Olympics need to stop this, someone needs to take a knee. All of this happens. And we'll come on to why it happens in a sec, but let's go with what's real. So the fight happens. I think Khalifi landed 2 jabs. And bear in mind, I've seen enough of her fights to know she's not a power puncher. Maybe the Italian lady just kind of walked onto the shot. Maybe it was well timed. But if, as a boxer, you can't overcome a broken nose and you pull out after 46 seconds, either you're not very good, you're not very tough, or you're making a political point. And I think the Italian lady, is it Assisi? I think she knew what she was doing. She was never going to win the gold, but she becomes one of the stories of the Olympic Games now. She's made herself into a hero. She's going to go home, she's going to get all the TV she wants and all the endorsements and all the sympathy she wants. Very manipulative, but also very clever. Meanwhile, everyone has turned on Imran Khalif in a way that is disgusting, actually, to see adult human beings do this. I saw, Katie Hopkins had something to say about this. Have you noticed Katie Hopkins has started filtering her videos now so we can't see those lines that are just etched in her face? It literally looks like someone Stanley knifed her when you see her in the flesh. So she's there trying to pretend too. And she's criticizing someone she claims is pretending while she's pretending herself. This is how stupid it is. So now, boxing at the Olympics is going to be known as just being a bit of a circus, right? And every brain-dead, knuckle-dragger, failed GCSE person is an expert with an opinion, right? Walking around going, that's a man. And it's like, well, no, it's not. That's someone who was born, and on the day that they were born, a doctor looked and said, based on my experience of having done this a few times in my life, this is a girl. It wasn't, to my understanding, it wasn't, I don't know, more tests are needed. It was, this is a girl. On all of her official documents, it says girl or woman. Never has said boy, never has said man. And this is Algeria. Algeria ain't into no funny business. Algeria is not into the rainbow. Like, they don't have an agenda. They don't need to flood the market with trans. They're not doing that. Like, Algeria, like, that's a woman, that's a girl. They're not messing about. Right? And I wish people would get their heads around this, but people are so in love with their own worldview that they don't mind being stupid. And for the younger generation, you'll never know what it was like before social media. The great thing about having no social media growing up was you didn't have to hear these idiots. I mean, the way you filtered them out was just by not being in the same place as them. It was easy. Now, your timeline's polluted with with these headbangers, chewing on crayons, whatever it is they're doing, trying to hump a seat post, the normal stuff, right? And all the people who want to have this debate, just go and look at Amy Broadhurst's tweet. And I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to summarize it. Amy Broadhurst has the most balanced view on this. Her view is this: Imam Khalifa is not trying to cheat anybody. It's how she was born, it's how she's been raised, it's how she lives her life. And the fact that she's lost to 9 women have beaten her, or she has lost 9 times. That tells you that this isn't someone who's light years ahead. Do you think Clarissa Shields has that kind of defeat record? And I mean, she put herself in harm's way too. And no one has that perspective because they're so wedded to this idea. And what they can't do now is they can't walk back and go, actually, do you know what, I was wrong. So now everyone's just going to dig in and go, well, it's just my opinion, mate. Do you know what I mean? I'm entitled to my opinion. And the sad thing is, this is why democracy doesn't work. Because Keir Starmer sits at number 10 and goes, these guys are too stupid to understand what we're doing. They're too stupid to hold us to account. They're too stupid to make intelligent voting decisions. They will do what we tell them to do. The public is outraged because they were told to be outraged. It's not independent thought. Because if it was independent thought, the first question you would ask is, what's a gender test? What are the criteria of passing? What are the thresholds that you need to overcome in order to pass? Serious questions, right? Foundational questions. And then you would say, is the test the IBA talking that is the test that the IBA are talking about designed to establish those criteria and those parameters, yes or no? And I think you'll find there's a massive disconnect because different people see it differently, okay? When we get those results and it says, yes, she's above the threshold, then what do you do? If it says she's below the threshold, we know what to do. And people use the example of Caster Semenya because Caster Semenya was intersex and she had elevated levels of testosterone. I think ethically that was a disgusting decision. And I don't believe if Semenya was American, that would have been allowed to happen. In the same way that when Carl Lewis was failing tests, allegedly, no one was notified. It was like, the world doesn't need to know about this. So let's not underestimate the price that Khalifa is paying for being from a non-traditional Olympic nation. There's a real incentive to keep the gold, silver, and bronze medals in the established nations, the nations that put money into this movement, because everyone's got to eat off it at the back end. So people like Khalifa are a big risk because supposedly it's a shortcut to success. No, it's not. You're seeing it. She's not winning everything. So where are the things that are messed up here? Let's just spitball some examples of things that are messed up. When Leah Thomas was trying to get into women's swimming as a transgender athlete, we were told by the same people, by the way, the same headbangers right now who are trying to argue a point. They were the same people who said, whatever's on your birth certificate is your gender. Whatever you were born with is your gender. You can't change your gender. That was a hard line. Whatever is in your document is what you are. And then we get to this point, and in all of her official documents, it says either girl or woman. But it says female. And all of a sudden, that's not good enough. Now it's like, well, okay, now we need to see the chromosome profile. And as I said earlier, you can have the syndrome. You can have Turner syndrome, where you're not going to come up as a pure XX. And more importantly, because we don't test for gender at scale, we have no idea what the profile of XX actually is. It's something that we just kind of accept to be true, but we've never tested 10, 20 million to see actually what is the profile across all chromosome groups. What do they look like in terms of relative health, length, whatever? Are there men that exhibit XX traits? Are there women that exhibit XY traits? I'm sure the answer to both is yes, but we don't force them into another gender. So you're dealing with this mess around definition, and when the definition didn't suit them, they moved to another one. Oh, well, and then you hear all of these sort of weird justifications for all of this, like, yeah, well, men are bigger and stronger and have thicker bones, and you hear all of this stuff until you go, well, that's true sometimes. And I'd use the example of Venus and Serena Williams. So Venus is 6'1", right? And Venus probably walks around at about 82, 83 kilograms. Serena's 5'10", probably walks around right now. If she stood on a scale, she'd be somewhere around 93. Those are big human beings. Now, you stand one of them next to a flyweight kid. If they get to tussling, they'd fancy their chances. Do you know what I mean? Like, the Williams sisters would fancy their chances. So this idea that there's this division of ability between men and women is ridiculous. There are really, really strong women. There are really big-boned women, with Diplodocus type skeletons. And if you've ever been around them, if you've ever dated one, you'll know, because when you try and move them, they're almost immovable. These women exist. They have to exist, because you don't get people like Shaq, you don't get people like Andre the Giant, unless both mum and dad have big genes in them. These are just biological realities. So you're going to get big women and you're going to get strong women. The thing is, we don't find out who's genetically gifted until they start taking gear or start training hard, because then you can see, okay. I'm trying to think of a really good example of that. So there's a lady called Andrea Shaw, and Andrea Shaw is a female bodybuilder, the best of her generation right now by some distance. If you look at Andrea Shaw before and after, you wouldn't know she was that gifted. But you look at her now and you're like, whoever had kids with her, kids are going to be monsters. And then there's the data that we think we have a good handle on, and it's this. If you took a sample of women in competitive sport, so if you took all the women that played in the Olympic Sevens tournament, the ratio between the woman with the highest levels of naturally occurring testosterone and the woman with the lowest level could be 4 or 5 to 1. Okay? 4 or 5 to 1. You would never see a ratio like that amongst men. You wouldn't see that inequality. You might get men in a range from 1,500 at the top end to about 600 max. But just for the sheer training loads required, you couldn't. So now think what happens in women's sport when you've got testosterone levels 5 times the woman next to you. You can train harder. You can recover faster. You can just do more and express more of those benefits than she can. But we're okay with that inequality. Whereas if you took the woman, let's just say they all pass the XX test, the woman with the highest testosterone level amongst the XX population versus Khalif would be 1.5 max. Maybe not even 1.5. It may even be 1 to 1. We don't know. But that would be a good test to run. What I'm saying is the gap between the women at the top, the physically and genetically gifted women at the top, and Khalif is smaller than the physically gifted women and the non-physically gifted women. And this is why, in the absence of trans or intersex or anyone who's controversial at the moment, in the absence of those people, you're still seeing women in rugby getting poleaxed, smashed, having to retire through concussions. I've used the example of Kat Merchant numerous times, where Kat was quite a slight winger and she was just taking hits, and eventually she couldn't recover from the concussions. But you look at Kat Merchant now, and she's on the training hard, and now she's got a bit of size on her. But how did she get there? Who knows? But rugby is an example of what happens when you have women of vastly differing levels of conditioning, different hormone profiles. People get smashed. Go and watch the videos of the It might be like the Samoan under 16 girls. I think they might play the USA. Go and watch that. That's far scarier than what I saw Khalif and Amy Broadhurst do. And ostensibly, they're all women. All girls and women. So my question is, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Because we have to be very honest and say, what inequalities are we prepared to live with? Right? Are we happy with women having 5 times the level of testosterone on one end than the woman on the other end of the scale? Are we happy with that? Are we happy with women having thicker wrists, thicker joints, what differences, what advantages and disadvantages are we willing to tolerate? Because it can't always just be about, testosterone, bone density, because that ignores so many other things. If you understood how hormones work, it's not just the anabolic and androgenic aspects of them. It's the potentiation. Basically, you can turbocharge so many different things. Like if you've got high testosterone levels naturally, you're more alert, you're more energetic, you're more enthusiastic mentally, your focus, your visual acuity goes up, your willingness to take risks go up. There are all of these advantages it gives you versus a person that doesn't have them. So what inequalities are we prepared to endure? Because if you really wanted sport, and particularly combat sport, to be fair, you'd cut off women with low testosterone. You say, no, it's not safe for you guys to enter. And you'd have this higher tier. Whoever fits into that higher tier, crack on. And that would be the sport. That's where the sport ends up, because no one has ever said, why is it that in boxing there are so many same-sex relationships relative to the broader population? Are we saying that there's something unique about sexuality in sport? Well, probably not. But we are examining hormone profiles, aren't we? And saying, well, what does that actually do? And so there are all of these things that don't get you to a right answer, but what they tell you is Iman Khalif is not a sinner in this. She's just trying to do the best that she can within the rules that have been specified, and that is all you could ever do. So where's this all come from? I think it comes from a number of different places. I think we're living in this kind of macro trend of permanent anger. Angry at our politicians, angry at our supermarkets for shafting us, angry at landlords and banks for shafting us. We're permanently angry. We jump on social media and there's just more anger. Now it becomes a competition to see who can get the angriest, the most offended by things. And the irony is, if you look at who's making the most noise at the moment, it's those people that always claim to be anti-woke, right? But they exhibit the same energy that the wokies, as they call them, would exhibit. It's about cancelling. These guys were anti-cancel culture. Now they're saying, get rid of this woman from the Olympics. The definition of cancel culture. And that's, for me, the root of it, is that kind of just latent anger. It's cool to be hateful. It's cool to be negative. It's cool to be aggressive. These are not, balanced and reasoned opinions being formed. These are just knee-jerk reactions that are born out of things like knife crime, and people are like, why can't we stop the boats? And, why is my cocaine cut to shit? All these sorts of things that these guys worry about, right? Why have I got to pay 13 quid for fish and chips and I used to get this for 7 quid? I can't feed my kids on a Friday anymore. There are real problems woven into this. But then we start to just point it at the people that little dwarves from Luton like to point at, right? Immigrants, the lefties, as they call them, are people who say, well, maybe she is a woman. Oh, you're just a lefty. You're just an apologist. And people call this a culture war. It's not a culture war, because we're all suffering together. So it's not a culture war. It's creating a cult of self. That's what we're doing with this. We're creating a cult of self. Maybe I'm part of this too, where our opinions are more important than anything else. My feelings are what are important, not yours. My feelings. I care about my feelings above all else. And that's where we are. And there's a poor woman, Iman Khalif, that has to go through this. Imagine her family now seeing her get roasted. And they're like, that's our daughter. And I think I've said this before. Imagine your whole life, people have said you look funny, you look odd. Why have you got no boobs? Why have you got no ass? Why have you got no hips? So guys weren't approaching you because they're like, ah. Maybe girls weren't approaching you because like, oh, what's there to do here? You know, I'm not saying that to be flippant either. I'm saying this seriously. Like, you go through life being the odd one out. And by chance you find boxing. In boxing, you matter. People clap for you. People cheer for you. People smile when you win. Right? That's your happy place. You love going to training. You love what it's doing for your life. You now have purpose. You now have meaning. This is how you can be you. To have that ruined and tarnished by some overweight guy from Darlington who's just mad at the world and decides to take it out on you. And the whole pylon that comes with that from the same people who rioted in Hartlepool and Manchester and Southport. You know, the people who are going to bring along the police state quicker than anything else. The very thing they're trying to fight, allegedly. And it's the same people. You can't help some people, can you? Do you remember when the Taylor Swift pictures popped up? You know the one, the AI generated image, and Twitter shut that down. And when the Kamala Harris images came up, Twitter shut that down. It's disgusting that Twitter haven't shut down this pylon. Disgusting. Because like I said, those close to Imam Khalif have to see this. Imagine that was your daughter, that was your sister, that was your friend, and you had to read this drivel being written about them. I can't tell you whether she's a man or a woman, but here's the thing, guys. I can't tell you for certain if anyone is a woman. So here's what's going to happen. We now have to test all the women at the Olympics to make sure it's fair. Did you see the American swimmer who was like 10 seconds ahead of everyone? Why is she not getting tested? That doesn't seem like fair competition. Why is she not getting tested? Probably because she's American. If she was from Swaziland, she'd have been tested, like Caster Semenya was. Semenya would never have been tested if she was American, if she was British. She'd never get tested. What British athletes have ever had a gender test? None to my knowledge. I can firmly believe if you took 1,000 of those women athletes at the Olympics and tested them, there'd be at least 10 to 20 instances where we'd be like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. So be careful what you wish for when you talk about stuff like gender tests. And also just think about this from a political perspective. What we're saying here is women need to be nannied more than men. We're basically just saying women aren't up to standard. That's what we're saying, right? Because when Annika Sorenstam wanted to come and play golf with the men, when the Korean golfer, whatever her name was, I forget, when she wanted to come and play with the men, what did the men say? Yeah, come on. Come and find out for yourself. Come and hit off these men's tees. Let's see where you get to. And it turned out they weren't very good when judged by the men's standard. But we welcomed them in. No one said, oh, you're the wrong gender. But now all of a sudden, women need to be protected. Protected from what? Like, this is, like I told you, I call this fake hard manism. These are guys just trying to be hard men. Oh, look at me protecting the women. They're the same guys that, you know, when a couple are having an argument, and remember, couples, they know each other. They know each other's buttons and each other's limits. And they're having an argument. And then there's always that, like I said, the fat dude from Darlington or some northerner who just waddles in with something to say. These are the same people that can't mind their own business and get on with life. They feel the need, women are frail, fragile, weak. I have to show my strength by getting involved. No. Women are perfectly able of regulating their own business. Leave them to it. Yeah? Nobody, before this week, no one was complaining about Imam Khalif. No one. None of the fighters. You haven't seen them in the media going, yeah, she hit me so hard, man, I didn't know what day it was. And when people say, oh, but look what she did to the Italian woman's nose. Listen to me. Go and watch an Imam Khalif fight and you tell me you couldn't happily stand there and take those punches to the face. Because I could. They're not hard shots. She boxes well and uses her levers well, but they're not savage shots. There are women boxers who we'd class as XX, who hit harder and do more damage. But all this noise is going to do is bring the agenda for gender tests forward. Once again, women having to suffer, women having to justify who and what they are for the pleasure of men from Darlington with beer bellies. And the arse crack showing out their jeans because like they have no glutes or nothing. What a hateful mob they are. And I feel for Iman Khalif. Like, how do you box now? Like, just, I mean, if she can make it through the next fight, man, that's character. You got to applaud that. Because the last thing I was going to say was, if you've ever been to Paris, on God, there are so many women that look like Iman Khalif. That looks not unusual in Paris. That kind of drifting into the androgynous look is not unusual in Paris. Like, in the old days, they were the models. Guerlain, Lacroix, Chanel, they were the models. But you guys don't get it, man. Now, 30 minutes of stuff that's just gone over most people's heads. So let me keep it really simple. Let Iman Khalif stay where she is and do what she's doing. She's not harming anybody. That's it. She's not harming anybody. And if you want to argue that, go and talk to the 9 women that beat her. They're the ones that matter. Take care, guys, and have a good week.
Porky's Corner is proud to be sponsored by Spartan Site Solutions. They are specialists in civil engineering and demolition contracts for the construction industry. Interested parties should visit their website or contact Porky's Corner for a referral at porkycorner@mail.com.